Well, hello, everybody out there in living experiment and healthy deviant land. It's been a while. I'm so glad to be back live with you and with one of my favorite experts on the topic of movement and fitness. I don't even like to use the word fitness. That's kind of like it doesn't come out of my mouth well. I have so many anxieties about that topic. And I want to acknowledge that the topic of movement and exercise and fitness is probably the one that I have been most hesitant to include in topics for the Living Experiment podcast and in my own Healthy Deviant You universe, in part because it's just so fraught with anxiety and misunderstanding and frustration for so many people. I will start by saying, before I introduce my wonderful guest, that I spent a long time editing a health and fitness magazine that many of you are familiar with called Experience Life. And I think it's the best health and fitness magazine on the planet. I still feel that way. And yet, there were a lot of times where I felt like month after month, as we're giving people new workouts and new strategies and ways to approach their reps and their sets and their little, techniques for fitness and monitoring their fitness, it got overwhelming to me. And a lot of my life has been spent trying to figure out ways to integrate movement and activity in ways that felt good to me and that were pleasurable and enjoyable and feel good enough. I just wanted to keep doing them. And I know that this is a challenge for a lot of people. For a lot of folks, it's easier to adjust their nutrition and their eating than it is for them to launch into a so-called fitness program. And one of the reasons for that is that most of us are lacking energy and resilience and vitality that we would need to get into such a program. So what we're going to be talking about today is a very different approach to even thinking about movement and activity. And I want to welcome my guest, who's the best expert on this, Katy Bowman, who is a best-selling author. Her book, Move Your DNA, has been a huge hit around the world, has been translated into lots of different languages. She has other books like Dynamic Aging and books on alignment and biomechanics and books on how raising a healthy family. Her more recent book is called Grow Wild. So Katy Bowman, I met at the Ancestral Health Conference in New Zealand, and I'd been following her for years at the time. I was really excited to meet her. And I feel like in the meantime, she's become a friend and colleague and someone who I feel really comfortable turning to for expert advice on the topic of movement, activity, so-called exercise, so-called fitness. Katy, I want to welcome you to our show for the day, which is both a Living Experiment episode and a Healthy Deviant broadcast. So welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I love chatting with you.
I love chatting with you too. I think in part because you are yourself such a healthy deviant and living experiment kind of person. And I feel like you've been really brave, really courageous in speaking the truth of what you know about healthy movement. And I think breaking down a lot of myths and misperceptions and limiting ideas that people have about what it means to be an active or exercising person. And maybe that is a good place to start. All of your work is wrapped up in a platform and a philosophy that you call nutritious movement. And I guess for folks who are not yet familiar with your work, I'm excited to make them familiar with it. But could you start by just talking a little bit about your own philosophy of movement and how you think about it, why you refer to your approach to it as nutritious movement, or just a basic understanding for folks who don't know?
Yeah, well, I definitely try to capitalize on the framework of nutrition that we're more familiar with. So it would be the idea that we know that we need to eat, but eating is not enough. All of us are eating. Most of us are fortunate enough to eat most of the time. But even when you're eating enough, it might not be nourishing food that you are consuming. And so we break down our categories of nutrition into macronutrients and micronutrients. And the more involved you are in nutrition, the more you realize that it's not eating enough, it's eating a range of foods, and you get more and more dialed in. And then you start to recognize what a nutrient even is, which is a nutrient is some compound that you have to ingest, that without that compound, there are very predictable symptoms that arise, and those symptoms go away when you introduce the compound back again. That's how something is deemed a nutrient in the first place. Yeah. Food isn't the only nutrient. We also have sunlight, right? So sunlight would be a non-food compound that we need to have as an input. I break down all nutrients into input. And so it was to really help people understand that movement is a nutrient, but like food, it's not simply getting enough movement calories. We are definitely living in a movement drought. And so we're hyper focused on steps or minutes or workouts, bouts, but we don't really recognize that there are movements that are more nutrient dense. And so I'm trying to bring out this concept to be like, yes, we need enough movement calories, just like we need enough dietary calories, but we need to have a diverse range of foods or a diverse range of movements. The movement needs to be distributed well throughout the body. And so that's what nutritious movement really is speaking to, that it is not only move more, it's move more of your parts. It's move all of your parts. And then the part that I love the most is, and that can be done within your life. It doesn't actually have to be the exercise model, which would be more akin to the dietary supplement model. Like you're not necessarily eating a better diet. You're looking for the compounds outside of a diet to nourish you nutritionally. With movement, we're sort of movement starved, and then we go to reach the hyper dose of the single movement or the handful of movements, and it's that same compound again and again. and it's a natural solution. But I'm just trying to say that movement hasn't gone away. As much as we don't see it anymore, it's still available for the taking, and it slots actually much more into life and enjoying your life. Just like good food is not only a conduit of nutrients, right? It's a conduit of experiences, of learning, of being with other people, and movement can be the same.
I love that. And I think that delineation between micronutrients and macronutrients is a really healthy one, because I do think we've kind of lumped all exercise, at least conscious pursued exercise, into one category. And we have tended to think about it in terms of either burning calories or building muscle. And we do these kind of, discrete exercise movements, usually in one plane or another. And we forget about how they all interact and why they're all necessary in the body. And for me personally, I found that when I was a kid, I moved all the time in lots of ways that were pretty natural and comfortable for my body. And it wasn't until I became an adult that I got this idea, in part because of the era in which I was born. I was born in the late 60s, and in the 70s, there was a little bit of like, we're jogging or we're doing yoga. But in the 80s and 90s, we got really into jazzercise and going for the burn and fitness clubs. And then I thought to myself, oh my God, I have to learn all of this stuff about that sort of technology of exercise and exercise environments. Meanwhile, my own life was becoming more and more sedentary. And I was becoming basically malnutritioned at the movement level from all of my sedentary behaviors and pastimes, which included driving and sitting in a car, sitting in a chair, or a series of different kinds of chairs, standing in line, but not a lot of moving in the way that I did as a kid, which was running and jumping and lifting and moving and pulling. And I know that you really make a case for the fact that even when people think that they're being active by going to the gym or by riding their bike, 20 miles a day, they're actually spending a lot of their time in these more contained and limiting sedentary spaces and mindsets too. Do you feel like in the time that you've been alive, you've seen that same kind of movement, I guess, away from movement, that in general, we hear that we've statistically anyway, become more sedentary, are spending more time sedentary? Do you think that people's efforts at getting to the gym and doing all this weightlifting and running on treadmills and things has helped, harmed, or left us in kind of a similarly disadvantaged space, maybe with just different problems?
Wow. That's a good, it's thought-provoking. So what is this? This is 2020. And I would say I came to fitness probably in the 90s. So that gives me, a 30-year span. Fitness has really, it's not been around that long. I mean, like it's hard what you want to call fitness, like the Greeks and many cultures had physical conditioning at the root of many cultures, right? So it's not new in that sense, but definitely fitness in the way that we think about it came on around the 80s when, it was associated with better heart health and that you could like take this dose of something,
Right.
physical
The
activity to
supplement
make yourself
model.
better. It was a
Yeah.
supplement model,
Yeah.
and there's a relationship. We have a relationship with time as we get older. I think that the relationship with time is sort of underappreciated. When we're children, we have a very flexible relationship with time. And I think that the time container is really the thing that we're pushing up against with movement. And then as our lives get more adult, more professional, busier, and as our professions become not building homes but building documents, like as you shift away what you're doing even as a profession, your relationship with time becomes like, I can do anything as long as it can fit into a 15-minute increment or a 30-minute increment. And so it makes sense to look for solutions that meet the 15, 30-minute, 45, 16-minute model. But that's just more a result of other elements of our culture. So fitness definitely came on and it peaked. I mean, like the way fitness worked in cities, like there was jazzercise and body focus, and it was really fun. I think that it added. There's a lot of focus on play right now for children, and I think fitness sort of met the play element for adults. Or like the treadmill is boring, but like how about stepping up and down on a box, and screaming while you did it. Like there was like more joy and dance, like
community.
It was. It really was. Like one of the earliest papers that I did was how group exercise fitness was meeting a community void. So I'm trying to really reframe it to say, like, we keep trying to get these things that we know in this time box, where I can step in, put on the outfit, do the thing, rinse off, and put on my next costume for the next element of my life. Like we're very much in the superhero, in the box, shift and change. And I think that that's sort of the opposite of slow, right? So this idea of like, slow movement would be what you did as a kid. And now we're doing this like fast sort of industrialized version of movement. But I do think fitness, we're on the trajectory out for fitness in that way. And the way I would measure that is the decrease of, and it has a lot to do with publishing changing overall too. But there's just like a decrease in fitness publications, in fitness shows. Newspapers don't really have fitness columns as much anymore. And at the same time, though, there is movement more to outdoors, being outside, jogging, backpacking, hiking. Like I see a trend change, but that would fall outside of fitness. Like I think that a lot of people wouldn't think they were participating in fitness. Fitness is inside in a gym. They're doing something separate. So I think there's a shift now over the last 30 years to how people are getting their movement. But I also think there is a shift away from getting movement, period. So I think that's sort of what you were asking is I think people are moving less. I mean, definitely the last couple of years, just being in a pandemic time, so much research being done on adults and children, movement going down to almost nothing. And then, the new environment is really much online and how that affects, again, how we spend our day. Like even you walking around your office, in between typing on a computer, that walk around your office stopped when you started sitting at home. Like there wasn't even walking to and from the car. Right. So we are we're in a transition period. I definitely think we're in a transition period.
Well, you talk about the value of, I think you call it stacking exercise in ways that let you accomplish your daily activities you need to do anyway, while integrating consciously, or maybe not so consciously, but finding that you can accomplish multiple goals for cardiovascular and muscular challenge and, for flexibility and balance and proprioception. Could you talk just a little bit about that concept? Because I think for a lot of people, it will really come as a relief to not have to be limited to the idea that they have to do this thing we call regular life, then fit in a fitness activity, go back to regular life, switch the costume, go back because to me, that's become completely unrealistic. And I think for most people, it's overwhelming. We tend to blame ourselves that we're not getting to it or it's not happening often and we're not working as much as we should. But I really like what you have to say about the value of integrating movement into everyday life. So explain what you mean by stacking, if you would.
Yeah. So, movement was never a separate phenomenon than everything else a human needed to do. So everything that we used to have to do was really on this backbone of movement, from getting your food to your shelter to your relationships. Like, it was all done through some sort of physical contraction of your parts, right? So in that way, you meeting all of your other needs met your movement need at the same time. So when I explain stacking, we start with this sort of visual, which is name your needs, list your needs, relationships, rest, food, play, enjoyment.
Yeah.
And yes, like you have them. And the way we tend to go about it is in what I call in math, it's called in series. You're going to work on your food right now. You're going to work on your relationships right now. Then you're going to put on your costume and you're going to exercise right now. And you're going to put on a different costume. You have to go to work right now. And you're going to put on your sleeping costume. You're going to go to bed right now. So it's very one after the other. So stacking is more along the lines of like a permaculture model, which is looking at nature to say, so much is going on in natural systems. In our sort of time-obsessed brain, how could so much be going on when we know that every single thing requires so many minutes? It's like, well, it's all happening in the same minute. So you have 60 minutes where all the needs are being met at once, or multiple needs are being met at once. And so that concept of stacking the life for more movement, which would be the application of to look at the tasks that you're currently using. So like if we talk about just movement, what's the need for movement? The way I'm meeting the need, the task that I'm choosing to do would be going for a 30-minute run, driving across town to take a yoga class, whatever it is, you can wrap sort of a time bubble around it. And if you looked at what's happening during that period of time, you're meeting your need for movement. Stacking would be, is there a way where I can make this sort of my friend time? So let's say you always meet a friend for tea or coffee. You like to get together and connect. The task is going to the tea shop to meet the friend. The needs that you're meeting is hanging out with your friend. If you grabbed your tea and did an hour walk together, went to a nice park and did that, then you would be getting your nature time, your movement time, and your friend time in the same 60 minutes. Yeah. And so stacking is this idea of going, how can I swap out the movement-free versions of how I've been meeting all my needs? And the nice thing is when you find the movement-rich version, it usually involves more nature and more community, which are also needs. They're on all of our needs spectrum. You increase the nutrient density of a period of time. Like that's what it's all about. It's not so much that we're time obsessed, is like our food, our calories have become very poor in nutritional density, and our time is the same way. When you approach everything in series, trying to meet tasks in isolation, the nutrient density of your life goes down. Yep. You're struggling to find those short periods of time where all of the essentials are coming in. And instead, you're just sort of like shallowly getting a little bit of everything and hoping for that next fix of a holiday or a vacation. But holidays, right. This would be like more of like how to live your daily life, where it was meeting your needs in the way that a holiday time or a vacation time would normally be allowing it. So that's what stacking is all about.
Yeah, that's great. I know people who go online to do a little research on you will inevitably find pictures of you doing things like carrying your groceries, either around in the store or home.
Terrifying.
What? There's no rolling device. There's no mechanical lift. But I think that that's also a really good example of how you fit in by choosing to do things with your physical body that could be mechanically assisted or could be, eased in some way, you make a conscious decision to stack, a variety of different movements, opportunities together. And I'm thinking of some really, we talk a lot in our My Healthy Deviant You group about how the unhealthy default reality, my name for our society, has created circumstances where the defaults are sedentary and generally passive and generally not healthy. And the choice to become more active or more nourished requires a lot of additional effort and thought on your part, sometimes extra expense, and again, extra time, which most people don't have, whether it's because you're now cooking your own nutritious meals at home, which involves, shopping or gathering them or whatever. But figuring out how to make these experiences pleasurable, in part, I think because you're consciously choosing them, is also a strategy for building autonomy and deciding that you are going to make your own way in the unhealthy default reality. You and I talked when I was on your podcast talking about healthy deviance, about how it can be very uncomfortable to do the thing that other people see as weird. Some more extreme examples, I think you've advocated for, well, this doesn't seem extreme to me, but I think people will be like, what? It's like getting rid of some or all of the furniture in the spaces where you tend to sit for long periods of time. Not saying that you can't ever sit, but that if you sit on the floor or if you sit on cushions, you're going to be more likely to move and be in lots of different spaces and move your body in ways that are going to be vastly more nutritious than, in being in a recliner on a sofa in a lump and not moving at all. How much have you found in feedback from the folks who have, for example, tried these things? How much have you heard back about, wow, this is just really odd and weird at first for me, but now I'm getting used to it and like it, versus, well, it's odd at first, but I really like it, but my friends or my family or my relatives think it's really strange. And I'm thinking about this with stacking too, like, what you want to do what with me? We used to just go for wine. Now you want me to go on some nature hike with you? Like, I can see how that could provide social friction in some cases. Sure. What do you hear back from folks when you counsel them to do these kinds of things?
All of it. All of it. You hear, I'm replaying a couple of just recent emails or comments in my mind, which is like, I can't believe this is all I'm doing and I feel so much better. Like, I don't understand why me just sitting on the ground for, like, I watch 2 hours of Netflix a night and one of the hours is set on the floor. Like, I don't understand why it's working. Like, why is it this simple? And I'm always trying to convert it. I'm like, you just stretched for an hour. Our minds are so rigid, and we're not very flexible. And again, when you hear exercise, it has to look a certain way and be a certain way. It looks like the commercial version of exercise for sale.
Yes.
Not it's like, it does it, exercise not for sale. Like, how could that be? It's like, it's exactly the same thing. You go to a class to stretch out your hips, and they have you get on the floor and you put on soft pants and they move you through different positions. Like,
and they charge you $25.
That's right. That's right. And so we have begun to devalue, and like, there's almost like a perceptual blindness to the idea, like, if it doesn't look like that, we understand why exercise would make us better, but how is just moving us making better? I'm like, exercise is just packaged movement. It's just the commercial version is all that it is. So you hear that, these changes are, all they are is moving more. That's all they are. So you are, whatever you know about the benefits of exercise that come in this many reps, and that it happens when you're not doing it that way too. And then the other part, is challenging, which is, I'm all on board, my family is not, or I would like to do a walking meeting, but not everyone in the office is on board. And then there's also the other limitations of, and not everyone in my office can, for physical ability reasons. Like, how do I negotiate the fact that we're doing things in groups? And I spend all day offering solutions to that. There are many solutions, but the idea is, movement is one of those things where, here in the United States, New Year's resolutions are a thing, and almost everybody has move more on the top of their resolution list. But in their minds, they're thinking exercise more, another class, another session, another carve outside my life. And so I do think it is one of those things for healthy deviants to maybe have more success doing, because maybe not everyone wants to eat your Brussels sprouts, but like, because there's a palate, like there's a palate that's involved. But even the people like, I don't want to get on the floor. There's nobody at the end of an exercise class who doesn't say like, well, I feel better now. Right. You know what I mean? You don't get people who are like, that was a huge waste of time. That walk didn't relax me,
Yeah. Never doing that again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like you just go, I don't know how to do it on my own. And I get the most. I don't know how to do it on my own.
Yeah. Well, it's, that's another piece we talk a lot about in the living experiment and Healthy Deviant You, is this challenge of, coming from a hunter-gatherer existence of 2.5 million years of human history, during which everything in our system DNA-wise evolved. We're going to talk about DNA. And then being thrust into this kind of post-agrarian, now modern or postmodern reality where all of the defaults create disease and discomfort and not health. And then we're sold the solutions to those problems by the same system that sold us the problems. And so it's this kind of ongoing downward spiral where you buy into the program or the product or the packaged solution you just paid for by earning money that you spent, time earning that wasn't very healthy for your body, most likely. And then, you expend your resources seeking the solution to the problem that was created by the way that you live. And it's a downward spiral for a lot of people. So I think there's something very exciting about the notion that this doesn't have to be another consumer packaged product or a subscription service or some deliverable that you need to consume or put on, that this can be just a way of making kind of almost minute adjustments to the way that you're already living and doing the things you're already doing, but integrating movement consciously in ways that end up producing the same or better results. I mentioned DNA, and obviously your book, Move Your DNA, talks a lot about that topic. This book blew my mind. I will be honest, even as a health and fitness professional and a journalist who'd read a lot of stuff, I knew that exercise and nutrition, exercise and fitness improvements had DNA level effects. I didn't know in how many different ways. I think I was sort of assuming that like any positive effect eventually can have, genetic switches go on and off. But you talk in Move Your DNA and some of your other books about a myriad set of ways that movement of the cell tissue itself, not just me doing jumping jacks, but the effect that happens at a cellular, biochemical, biomechanical level. You have a term, I think you call it squishing, or deforming of cells, or like actually putting our body in positions where our flesh is moved or our joint. Talk a little bit about that, because I don't think very many people know the first thing about that. And I want to hear it straight from you. Explain it.
Well, this is, I could nerd out. We could just talk about it forever, because this is, I'm a biomechanist. This is at the heart of why I care so much about people moving, is because it is so impactful. And I Move Your DNA, I was trying to really give to lay people, like, this is why every health professional you have wants you to move more. This is why there's very little argument at all about why we need to get moving more. Like, out of all the health things that there are out there, it's almost always a yay or nay, not with movement. Movement is just one of those things where like there's just full agreement across the board. Yeah. But why it's so protective is not readily clear. And it's not easy to parse. And it's also why it is still emerging, right? Because movement as a science is very new. Nutritional science, hundreds of years old. Movement science is much younger. So we are just at the dawn of movement. Movement is invisible, forces are invisible. And we had microscopes, we could see smaller things. That's why chemistry sort of took rank and why diet is so much more central to movement. You can't now with nanotechnology, there's things that are more clear of like, oh, these cells change their shape and their behavior when they're moved. Like, wow, like that's amazing. So
Yeah.
I guess that we would start with this idea that the benefits as we understand them with movement are really about the whole person benefit. My whole body is moving or it is not moving. So it's this idea that you're either in an active or a sedentary state as a whole person. I mean, this is definitely having some philosophy training under your belt will help, but in addition to your whole person being an exerciser or a not exerciser, your tissues respond. Like when you're moving, yes, your whole body is moving, but not all of your parts are always moving. And if I lift and lower my arm, yes, my bicep is moving, but if I didn't move my arm and just put something heavy in my arm, that would be enough to move the bone in my arm. So your cells also move. Like the reason your whole body moves around is because the smaller parts have to all adjust their shape to allow the motion of the bigger part to go. And that is, in addition to systemic benefits to movement, things that are easy to measure, resting heart rate, blood pressure, there are the local benefits to movement. And I was just giving, I was just talking, actually. I was on a backpacking trip and I was looking at my friends all, in their 40s doing their morning back stretches and dealing with their feet. And these were all very fit people, who've prioritized, but they're like, why is my body breaking down in this way? And I was just trying to explain that like, if you think about keeping your heart healthy, why we want our heart to push our blood around, but to say at the end of the day, what keeps your body parts healthy is that oxygen reaching its final destination. How oxygen gets to the actual deliverables, like oxygen is food for each of your cells. In Move Your DNA, I explained it like, imagine a map and you've got the highways, the big vessels, that's your arterial venous system, like the big tubes.
Yep.
But those don't actually get you anywhere. Those will just get you flying through all the cities. You can't get into a driveway onto the main highways. You have to get off onto a smaller road. And then, even then maybe it's a 4-lane highway, and then it gets a 2-lane highway. And eventually all the way down, you pull into a driveway. You pull the single car into the driveway. And that's what your body is. That's what your whole heart and lungs are for, is to get the cells into the driveway, get the oxygen into the driveway of all of your cells. But the way your body does that is through moving the individual parts. So when you have sections of your body that don't move well, there is no blood really circulating through that area. And that's why in fit people, even people who are doing that regular daily exercise, will still have things that arise in their body because their movement isn't as well distributed as they thought. They've been eating the same food over and over again, even if it's a nutritious food, it's got things in it what we need, but no single food is the diet for the whole entire body. So it's the idea that movement is also happening on the tissue level, the local tissue level. And then when the cells themselves are moved, that changes the behavior of the DNA within that cell. And it's still sort of, I think it's because we all come from the model of the nucleus controls the cell. And it's like, a top-down thing. And it's like, no, you're much more responsive than that. Your cells are responding to like, oh, our physical deformation is this. We're going to have to behave this way to take it. So the idea that the cells will be communicating in the opposite direction based on their mechanical environment, that's what's called the mechanome. Similar to the genome, it's the mechanome, the fact that there's mechanical forces that are also steering outcomes within the body. And it's what I love. People don't need to know it to that level, but I do think knowing that you can have sedentary parts inside an otherwise active body, and you need to get all of your parts. Like there is no real active whole person. There's active parts. The sum total of your active parts determines like your state of activity or not.
Well, and this is part of the reason that you make a case for reconsidering our footwear, for example, that I know you're an
Mhm.
advocate for barefoot or barefoot-like environments for our feet. You know, I say a lot that environment drives behavior. And what you're describing right now is like at the level of cells, the environment in which cells find themselves, active or sedentary, in a located spot, not just the whole body. But like you said, if your feet are not moving the way they were designed to move, there are probably a whole bunch of cells whose environment is that of like not very interesting and not much going on. And their behavior is going to be different than where cells would be like enlivened and moving and challenged and having sheer force and things. Do you find that there are particular parts of the body, like our feet, that have been, influenced negatively? I mean, all of them, I suppose, but in
Yeah.
particular, what do you see as sort of like the really big common trouble zones for people that they may not even be thinking about?
Well, the feet. I mean, I wrote 2 books on the feet, and again, I was explaining this on the backpacking trip. Like 25% of your parts of the body, as far as muscles and bones are concerned, are from the ankle down. So you've got
What?
this. I know, not in terms of mass, but in terms of number. So there's 33 joints in each foot. 33 joints in each. That's
Wow.
66 joints, and there's over 20 bones in each foot. So you've got a large portion of your anatomy um, that is underneath the weight of your entire body,
Yeah.
right? So not only is this complex anatomy, um, it's anatomy that bears the brunt of your weight. And it's also
Yeah.
the least trained, because even in fit people who exercise regularly, exercising the feet is sort of like off the radar. We do all of our exercise on our feet, but never really anything intra-foot,
Yeah.
never really moving the foot relative to the foot.
Yeah.
And we have this other habit of enshrouding our feet with very stiff, supportive things, because our
Right.
whole weight is on top of this very weak thing. So when you have a part that is capable of so much movement, where movement is part of, like, I always think of movement in our bodies as they're renewable resources, but they are renewed through movement. And
Mm.
so when you have a renewable resource that you have not renewed, then of course it starts to deplete. And so
Mhm.
movement, nutrition, yes, but even in terms of nutritional delivery, like in terms of bone,
Yeah.
you can have all the nutrients in your body. If you don't have the mechanical signal there, it will not go to be delivered to where it needs to go. So mechanical signals often precursor what you're doing with the building blocks that you're consuming, because
Mm.
because you're consuming fuel for movement and also fuel for rebuilding, and the
Yeah.
signal to rebuild is movement. So when you
Mm.
don't move, you don't need a robust structure. You can just excrete what you eat. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
if you're eating the pieces, there's no signal to where do I deliver this?
Yeah.
To which part of my body needs it? None of it. None of it's really doing much. It can go through. Yeah, I mean, it's so it's the idea of, like, you are telling a story. I always
Mm.
say your bones and skeleton is the one we're most comfortable understanding the rules of modeling and remodeling. Your bones are like your autobiography. You're writing it.
Mm.
And it tells a story about your juvenile period, and it tells a story about your middle life period and your older life period. It tells us a nutritional and a movement story, both, because also you can have all the mechanical signals. If you don't have the dietary nutrition, it also doesn't meet. But this shows, like, both of those things are, they're two, and movement and food are the same axis.
Yeah.
They have to be done at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, as far as structure goes and mechanic goes, it's really important for me to say that.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's something that people tend to think about in very separate universes. And I really like that
Totally.
you see the connecting purpose, not just at the level of the way we've been taught to think of it, is even as like the micronutrients and macronutrients, but what a lot of functional nutritionists and functional physicians and functional movement people talk about is like, it is that signaling. It's the information that is in the food or in the movement that you're doing that is signaling, giving directions to your cell tissue, to your DNA, to the sort of decision-making machinery within your body about whether it builds or breaks down, about whether it becomes more activated and aware, or it goes to sleep and becomes kind of inert. And I do think a lot of aging, sometimes it's described as unrepaired damage, that we all age, but it isn't the age that kills you, or that cuts your mobility short. It's the sort of lack of repair. But I think people tend to think about that as like only the bad part of that. Like you talk about renewability, and I think about exactly this, that if you put your body into challenge or you give it signals that instigate some kind of reaction or response, they're enlivened. They have new information to work with. They integrate that, and then they move on and do the next thing. Whereas I think too often we've been taught that it's just like, like calories in, calories out, or nutrition in, nutrition out. It's like, no, it's like, where is it going? What is it saying? And that's true not just of the food we eat, and why like whole food makes so much more sense than processed food. There's information still in the live, living, natural whole food. Same thing with movement. It's a different kind of signaling when I sit on a machine and just extend my legs up and down a few times than if I climb the hill behind my house and half fall down and have to grab a branch on the way, and my feet and my toes are curling. And I can see why one tells my body, like, you're alive and we are needed and we are showing up for you. We'll get stronger, Whereas the other one, it might signal that to some of my muscles in my, quadriceps or something, but it isn't waking my whole body up and asking it to work together in the way that I think bodies were kind of evolved to work. Yeah.
Well, one of the primary, we call it a law in movement science, like the law of specificity, which is, so like when we talk about like what's happening at the genetic level, or you could even think at the tissue level in terms of how am I adapting to this movement, if you sit on a machine and lift your legs up and down, the law of specificity, what it's saying is your body will become a machine. I use the term machine lightly, but it will become a structure for which sitting down and lifting the legs up and down, you are adapted to.
Yeah.
It becomes good at that.
Yeah.
And so I think the issue is where the misstep or the leap in logic that we're making is, if I sit down and lift my legs up and down, this will make my legs stronger so I can go out and climb the mountain. And it's really like, if you want to climb mountains as your goal when you're older, you need to make climbing mountains the movement that you do.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge with that would be like, I can hear in my mind like a person going, yes, this is why I run every single day, because I want to run when I'm older. We also have this other issue of sort of a range of capability of a tissue. So as much as we like to, humans can really push their edges or their boundaries and really morph their body into what they do. We are generalists, but there's been a lot of specializing going on lately. So like we can sort of like morph to do this particular thing. There's an end point to that. So in Move Your DNA, I tried to use nutrition again as the example. Like you can take a really nutritious food, but eventually it will kill you if you only eat that exclusively, because nutrients really work in an ecology. There's an ecology to nutrients, and it works well for movement as well. So if you want to climb mountains as you get older, or if you want to keep running, you need to make sure that there's an ecology to the movement that you're doing, so that you're not sort of breaking down your tissues in the way that using them over and over again does. Like that's the rationale for cross training. But for me, I try to expand that. Like that's why you have like a daily movement requirement that looks more like the RDA nutrition wise, the concept, not the values, but the concept of it, of going, it's not enough to have these in a month. It's sort of like a daily distribution that we need. And it goes for movement as well. So respect what your body is telling you, and make adjustments.
Well, so where folks I know get bunged up is where to start with this. You
Yeah.
know, folks who I have a gym membership and I belong to a yoga studio and I have this home fitness center. I'm still not doing anything. And I want to be doing it this way because, gosh, Katy Bowman, you're making a lot of sense to me. Where do you suggest people begin experimenting with this approach or finding ways to easily kind of on ramp into it, knowing, I think, or suspecting at least, that as people have that result of like, well, all I did was watch Netflix I watched last night, but I watched it from the floor for an hour and I feel really different. Like, I want to do more. Where do people start with this? Where do you suggest they go?
I know it's a tough question. I think so. I mean, I have the answer that's in my head, but I understand the audience that I'm talking to now has sort of identified health as their an identity. Health, as far as an identity, is not common. The idea of like, I want,
Yes.
I mean, people,
it's a healthy deviant attitude.
That's right. Right. People want to be healthy, but they wouldn't necessarily like make that their primary like orientation of their life like that.
Right.
Like there's many cultures for whom the concept of individual health doesn't even make sense if the community or the globe around you like, and I think we're sort of like, I think that might also be like, I'm always thinking about like, why is behavior that results in health such an outlier? And I think it's because the multiple layers of unhealth are so ubiquitous that how could you possibly be a healthy as an individual? So that might not resonate with this group, but if it does, this next step I think works for everyone, which would be identify some sort of physical behavior that you would like to engage in that you don't feel is you are there yet, or you are not doing for whatever reason. And that would be not so much like exercising 3 times a week, but more like, I would love to go camping with my kids for a week. I've always wanted to hike this mountain. I've never learned to swim. Like whatever it is, it has some sort of physicality to it. Like identify this. Like I have some sort of movement Mad Libs in my mind. And it's like, if my ex blank fill in the body part felt better, I would blank, comma, blank and blank, like, so build that in your mind because again, movement is personal. There's not really a right or wrong thing to do with your body. Like that's the nice thing about evolution is there's no set point in which you're going. We're just trying to keep going. So like, what is it that you would like to be doing? And make that sort of the picture on the fridge that you're going to. And then once you have that, for people who are in pain and feel like some single body part is keeping them from doing that, then that becomes your movement sort of centers around making this part move better, reintegrating this part into the movement of the rest of your body. Because, maybe like, I'd love to hike this, but I mean, my foot's been bothering me for 10 years, or my hip won't let me do that. So you need to acknowledge those parts and figure out what to do for those parts and the other parts around it to reintegrate where you feel more of a whole person that can get moving again. All of your parts are moving again. And in order to do that, like I always say, pick one movement a day. Like if you've figured out that, man, I feel better when I just stretch my hips every night, then that's your movement program. Hip stretching every night. And like, that's the one thing that you commit to. If there's one yoga pose you've always wanted to master, that's your exercise program, is just playing around with that single move. And then also to increase your daily walking by like 10 minutes. So if you already walk 3 miles a day, the challenge for you is going to be finding 10 more minutes to do a second walk. If you're not walking at all right now, then you're going to do 10 minutes. And maybe your 10 minutes is 3 minutes because of the things that are going on in your life. This idea is that we're looking at small bites. And think about finding one task that you're currently doing that would easily be done in a more movement-rich version. So that if you watch Netflix, you're watching it on the floor. If you're meeting a friend for coffee, or if you have a date night, you're going to walk to the restaurant, extend your date that way, or you're going to grab and go and do it that way. So if you just play around with that, what happens is movement is such you get into a cycle where you feel benefits so quickly from
Yeah.
movement that it makes you more interested in doing it again. Like if you overdo it, then sometimes you'd be like, I'm so sore, I can't do anything. But we're not talking about that kind of movement. We're talking about small amounts and going from there.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, it's funny. Two things happened when I decided to experiment with sitting on the floor. I discovered my floor was a lot dirtier than I thought it was. I got up close and personal to the dog hair, and I was like, okay. But that was actually an interesting little piece of it, because then I was like, I'm going to sweep. And then I actually decided to sweep in a way that actually just like maximized the movement. Like I squatted down and got underneath the sofa instead of just shoving the vacuum cleaner under there. And I realized that these things do tend to, like, one thing kind of leads to the other. And if you sit on the floor with the intention of like, I'm doing this for the purpose of giving my body more of an opportunity to move and to experience movement, suddenly your mindset shifts a little bit. This is even true. I have notoriously uncomfortable chairs in my house. And what I found, I have like old antique chairs that were kind of poorly upholstered. It makes me move around more. I get up and down and change my position, because otherwise I start to cut off the circulation in my thighs, and I don't want that. But it also made me realize, like, when it's time to get up from the table and move people, so we don't just sit there forever, even getting up and moving to the next room and finding a new sitting place. But that getting up and down and moving position from one place to another, as opposed to being just on the couch or just at the table for multiple hours at a time, really helps. If you think about, like, you talk, I think that there's an explainer, by the way, for anybody that missed it in the Healthy Deviant Facebook group. I should get the banner up so folks can find it. There's a little explainer, an animated video that Katy made that describes what nutritious movement is. And it sort of makes a case for it at the same time at nutritiousmovement.com. If you just scroll down a bit, you'll find it there. And I watched this little explainer and I was like, man, I think this is going to motivate a lot of people to think more broadly about what they are imagining as exercise or fitness activity. And for those people who are priding themselves on the fact that they do go to the gym and they do work out, maybe getting them to challenge themselves in new ways that are actually really beneficial to their whole system, as opposed to just checking the box of like, I did this much, and my Fitbit says I achieved all my goals for today. When I talk about autonomy, I really mean, like, who is running your show? And even if you wear this kind of thing, it's not going to tell you it's a good time to move from the dining room to the living room, or from the living room couch to the floor. You sometimes will get, time to stretch your legs a bit, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of different ways to stretch your legs. And I think what you're making a case for with nutritious movement is to find more variety, more opportunity to include more of the parts. As you said, our body isn't just a body, it's 3 trillion cells, each of which are their own body with their own needs and interests, and they're cross-communicating all the time. I think that that's just brilliant. One other thing I wanted to talk about, because we touched on it briefly, but I think it's really important as people begin to integrate this, is how our clothing, sometimes you almost refer to it as being casted in our clothes with tight belts and hose and heels and constraining things or can't get wrinkled things. How much of a barrier do you think that is at a conscious or unconscious level to people integrating more movement during the course of their day?
Huge. And with back to school this week, like a large portion of what I'm doing in my own work is just talking about the clothing as a container, like, well, I'll just talk about kids briefly, and then we can make the logical jump from children. Kids their clothes don't even allow them to participate in recess, like their legs physically are sort of bound by the tension in their pants, where they can't take big leaps, their arms can't go overhead because of the jackets that they're wearing. And it's those little things, like when you are someone who sees the world through a movement lens, you're like, there are so many sort of hurdles to movement that we're choosing because they are just features of the culture. So our culture, for the grownups, we definitely separate our clothes into active wear, and we don't name what all the other clothes are called, but those would be your non-active
Sedentary wear,
right?
Yeah.
They're your sedentary, like a sedentary culture just calls those clothes. And then the other clothes are active clothes. Like, so like, what are the features of the active clothes? They're clothes that your parts can move in more freely. The waistband doesn't keep you from bending over to touch your toes a few times throughout the day or getting a stretch at your desk. Your shoes could be worn for more than a mile versus putting your body into basically an outfit where you can't really walk for more than a few steps, like, or you have to take them off, when nobody's looking. I was thinking the other day, like, there's a lot where there's a guy in town who dresses basically in a animal costume all the time, 100% of the time. And, people are like, wow, this animal costume's really strange. And I thought, is it really that more strange than the other costumes that we wear? I felt it was sort of almost like art, that he was making a statement of going, you have chosen shoes that don't allow you to walk in. Like, that is a particular feature of our clothes. So the features, what we want to see more of would be the elements of active clothes show up in your work out attire, or the things that you would wear when you're out and about visiting a friend for coffee. I mean, there's definitely this we have the need to present ourselves to look in a particular way. We have, like, I can't just wear exercise clothes, can get dirty. We talk about children's clothes. They can get ripped, they can get wrinkled. But if you every day choose to put yourself in an outfit that doesn't tolerate movement, where are you to go? Like, how it's like filling up your refrigerator with ice cream and then wondering why you can't kick your ice cream habit. You know what I mean? It's just sort of taking the idea that we already know and putting it onto movement.
Oh, with COVID, I got muted accidentally. Sorry. I was gonna say,
Okay,
I
I
love
hear you.
that. And I was thinking about how, in COVID, we all got so comfortable wearing yoga pants, and there's this whole new fleet of
Sure.
like athleisure, Zoom friendly, whatever it is. But I do think it will have a permanent impact on people's willingness to put on the kinds of uncomfortable clothing that we were wearing, as a matter of course, previously. So I did promise folks I would give them a chance to ask some questions too. I could just keep asking you questions for another 5 hours. But we're coming toward the top of the hour, and I want to make sure if folks want to ask questions that we give them a chance to do so. And if you are generous enough to want to share a little bit of additional bandwidth with my Healthy Deviant U group, these are folks who've been in this year-long ongoing program, many of them for more than 1 year. Some are entering their third year now. Folks who have fully embraced the idea of healthy deviance and experimenting on a living experiment basis, who I think have become emboldened to try a lot of things that so-called normal people living conventional lives in the unhealthy default reality are not so willing to do, for understandable reasons, because as we've talked about, there's a real cost, a social cost to experimenting beyond the bounds of what is prescribed by our society. And, no one is going to look at you funny if you go to the gym to lift weights. People might look at you funny if you get rid of your couch or invite them to sit on the floor, or, suggest that rather than going for a bloomin' onion at TGI Fridays, what you're going to do is go to the local market, carry your groceries home manually, and proceed to make dinner and then eat it on the floor. I don't know. So those folks I know are going to have questions. Many of them will watch the replay and have questions then. But I want to ask you just up front if you would be willing to entertain a few questions from the group.
Sure, I'll pop in.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Well, we had one question from Rosie. It wasn't really a question, but it was kind of an aha moment. Where she recognized that she's like, oh, this is why my doctor suggested that I walk barefoot on this healing broken bone in my foot, is that it's actually going to help me, heal more completely than sticking it inside of a shoe. Could you just talk a little bit more about how, I think a lot of times when people injure their feet or their ankles, they suddenly get into like protective footwear, and they're like, they have orthotics and they have laces and they have padding. And why is it that it might be more beneficial just at the level of healing an injured foot, like a broken bone, or a strained ankle, to not go down that road?
Well, it's about the paradigm. So for many people, you get up in the morning, you put on your shoes and you sort of move, not really mindfully throughout the day. You've never been given an instruction to move your body well. There wasn't a ton of modeling of a lot of movement. And so you just move the way that you move. And if it comes to something like a repetitive fracture in your foot, that was also created through how you moved. So the idea with immobilization for healing in general is to like not allow the issue to become worse. And there's many cases in which immobilization is the right step, but I imagine initially, but the problem is like movement again is how the area gets fed. And so there needs to be sort of a weaning off protective immobilization to conscious, mindful movement, and then back into integration into life. You're not having to think about it so much. And so I imagine her doctor I'm assuming that she was after the immediate fracture or break. And it's like, okay, but now you need to mobilize the foot. And we're not really a culture. We don't have systems that are good at getting a lot of corrective movement. I mean, like in order to qualify for physical therapy and the duration, like it's just, you need a prescription for that, which is so weird. Yeah. Well, it's all financials. I mean, it comes down to financials. So at the end of the day, everyone can't get the movement instruction they need. So it's safest if nobody moves at all. Just don't let the part really move at all. And for many people, that's the place in which they're in. And that's what I do. That's why I do what I do, which is like, I will teach you some conscious movement where you can move with understanding and awareness and parameters that normally a professional would have to learn. You can learn those and then just move well. So in general, any injury is going to need movement to reintegrate, but it needs to be like there are moves that you can't just jump out and start doing cartwheels. There's a progression, and there's not currently a big venue for those progressions. So that's why things are so immobilized so often. Like it's understandable, but it's also not sustainable to go on this way, just to have people have huge hunks of their body that they can't move sort of forever. And sorry, we just need to go back to like, you're going to have to invest the time in learning about yourself in the same way that you learned about your car or your other tools of your trade that you oil regularly. Like you take care of your sewing machine, but we don't do any of that for our body because we don't have a manual on how to do it. So that's what I'm trying to provide.
I love that. Well, you certainly have done that. A follow-up question that came in around that was whether there's a particular type of barefoot shoes that you prefer over others. I mean, I know it's everything from the multi-toed kind of barefoot things to shoes that look like kind of streetwear, but are built along a more barefoot platform. Do you have any guidance on where someone who's interested in considering a more barefoot shoe wardrobe, where they should start?
Yeah, there's a whole, I get this question a lot. So if you just type in my name or Nutritious Movement and minimal footwear, you'll be taken to a huge list of tons of styles and also a reminder of the feature. So I wrote a whole book, Simple Steps to Foot Pain Relief, that was about understanding which features of a shoe do what. Why of the flexible sole? Why a wide toe box? Why an attached upper? That's the one that people often don't know about, which is like the difference between a shoe that slides on and a shoe that attaches to your foot so that you don't have to tense your feet to hold it on. So when you learn about those features, you might go minimal in some features, but not all. It doesn't have to be just, kick your shoes off and run into the hills barefoot. It's more about like, what do you need to do? Do you need a professional shoe? Are you looking for an athletic shoe or a hiking shoe? Do your kids need shoes? So it's broken down in that way. So you sort of have more understanding to learn how to negotiate the minimal footwear territory. And I also have to say that our feet, our rich in anatomy feet, need physical training before you remove the support that might have been around them for decades. So it is actually not my recommendation that people go right to minimal shoes as much as start with a foot exercise program so that you don't get yourself in a situation where you're a full-grown adult on weak feet, and then you basically pull the rug out from underneath them, right? Like, you know how muscles, but like, you don't get up off the couch after breaking an arm and go right to the gym to lift things, and your feet have to be under every step that you take. So transition well.
Oh, that's very good. Okay, that's great. We had a question about what you think about this kind of interesting question. What do you think about movement in conjunction with gaining better metabolic flexibility? Which I'm guessing has to do with whether you're metabolizing fats and carbs or not, or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that, but does that question make sense to you? What do you think about movement in
Not,
conjunction with gaining better metabolic flexibility?
I'm not sure what metabolic flexibility means there, but so if someone wants
They
to
might be able to
clarify,
clarify. Yeah.
yeah.
I was
I
thinking
mean, in
that.
general,
Go
yeah, go
ahead,
ahead
sorry.
if you.
That
Well,
was
I
my
was
only
just saying,
guess. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's always been, as far as the energies that you're utilizing, the intensity at which you're moving matters, if that's what they're
Yeah.
talking about. But I mean, like, when I also think about, I don't know, I'm not sure what flexibility means, but like, for people trying to deal with their metabolism overall, sort of being active constantly throughout the day is going to be, like, we'll say, generally good for your metabolism, because the way the systems work with muscle glycogen and insulin is to fuel bodies. Like, that system is evolved to bodies that move a large portion of the day, not necessarily intensely. So, like, the group that's most often researched for movement in this way and its effect on metabolism and cardiovascular disease are the Hadza, which is a Tanzania foraging hunter-gathering group, who still they subsist for like 90% of their diet, their subsistence foraging, and are extremely active, but they still only have that sort of 20 minutes a day of like peak intense. The bulk of it is just getting up and down off the ground, food preparation moves, carrying children, carrying water, carrying wood. It's not, they're not exercising hard for hours a day, but they don't have all the conveniences that we sort of laden our daily experience with. And that's that's how these tissues work best, right? That's why there's the storage in the various ways that we have it, physiologically speaking.
That's great. I think you did answer the question. She responded, yep, that's what I meant. Movement throughout the day versus planned exercise periods. So bully for you on that. Also, to comment from one of our HD, no, we did it, yay. One of our HD members, TJ and Anita, who said that they've been reading this book and doing some of the exercises, a 2017 book called Just Move by James Owen, who wrote this guy, wrote it when he was 70. And he was 70 and sedentary at the time. And it sounds like he had a major reclamation of his fitness. He calls it fitness after 50. But he said, TJ says, this feels like we're going to a whole next level with Katy. Thank you so much. So as always, you're mind blowing to folks.
Thank you.
And I will say, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I want to encourage people who are finding this information and this perspective useful to go look at some of Katy's books and just go to her website and watch that little explainer video on what she means by nutritious movement, and think about how that could alter your whole mindset around exercise and fitness, and whether it might be able to help you overcome some of the resistance that you have to thinking that you have to go join a gym or a special studio or get a special piece of equipment in order to begin moving yourself comfortably and safely, or that it is a whole like extremely complex, arcane bit of information that can't be learned by normal people or just can't be practiced even without learning it. It does make sense, I think, that like common sense warning, if you've been sedentary and not moved your body at all, throwing yourself into climbing the tree in your backyard might not be a good idea initially, barefoot or not. But I think you offer really good counsel on how to become more present in your body and enjoy moving it safely as you begin building to higher levels of challenge and complexity, and giving more interesting inputs to your system to challenge as well. Do you think that Move Your DNA is a good place for people to start who've never read any of your other books but might want to try to understand the philosophy?
Yes, I've written too many books to answer this question easily. I, I think, um, I think it depends on who you are, and it depends on that Mad Lib that I had you
Yes.
fill out in your
Yeah.
imagination before. So my assumption is for many people, there is some part of their body that doesn't feel great, and that's why they're not moving as much. I know that's not everyone across the board, but there is that. So like I mean, again, I wrote the foot books because it's like 1 in 4 women over the age of 50 can't move their entire body more because of a tiny inch painful spot on their foot, right? It's metabolically speaking, foot pain really heavily relates to why people aren't physically active throughout the day. So if that's you, then I would say start with the foot because it gives you some solution to start working on right away. And if you like, Dynamic Aging is also a really great book because that just sort of walks you through. So you want to be a mover and you want to move well when you get older, but you're feeling like you want to start at some place that's gentle. It's really laid out. It was co-written by 4 women that started working with me when they're in their late 60s and early 70s, and they were all, at the time I wrote it, 10 years later. We just had the 5-year anniversary. So now it's 15 years later, and you can listen to podcasts of them coming on and talking about what they're doing in their middle 80s now, including hiking all the national parks and going like whitewater rafting with their family, like really inspiring. And then if you are a body nerd and if the movement science really captivated you, then move your DNA. And if you're a parent, grow wild. So like I've really just tried to make all these different portals so that you can find the message that feels best for you.
To muted myself again. I love that. And I think they really are portals. It is, I think for me, as a science wonky kind of person, there's excitement and motivation in understanding how these bits of your body that no one has ever educated us up how to appreciate or understand or respond responsibly, and responsibly, that when I think about the urging that we get to just do it, just go exercise, however you need to do it, just go exercise. That never really turned my crank. When I started appreciating that something was happening at a cellular level, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, my mitochondria are going to do this and my DNA is going to do that. And all it really takes is like, if I just like even massage myself, there's something happening inside my cells that wouldn't be happening if I didn't. That's like mind boggling to me.
Yeah.
And once I get excited about it, I don't have to be a gym rat. I don't have to be a jazzercise aficionado. I don't have to be a bar studio person. I can just decide I'm going to move my body right now, today, for 10 minutes after we get out of this studio situation. And I know I'm going to feel better no matter what I do. But now I'm going to be more motivated to be creative about that and think about the planes that I'm moving in and which parts of all of my trillion parts I'm moving. And I just feel like that is so exciting. So thank you for being so inspiring. And Tracy's going to be posting a whole bunch of the books, including all your Katy's books from your bookstore. Yeah. And again, I'll post for folks that want to learn more about you at your site, nutritiousmovement.com. In addition to your books, it sounds like you've got some programs or apps or something that people can get into. I haven't even explored those. I'm very excited.
There's so much there. I mean, that website, I've been doing this for 20 years. Like I have just been like so many things, and I just keep trying to like find the thing for that person needs to come. But like when you come to the website, this is my new favorite thing. It sorts you into like, get me an exercise program or show me the non-exercise movement. And if you go to the non-exercise movement, it takes you to a little video that we shot, which is like a day in an active life that has really no exercise. I mean, I am teaching a class of corrective exercise in a short blip, but you sort of see like, oh, I could just sort of imagine what it looks like stretching while you watch Netflix and using lower furniture or folding your laundry sitting and stretching on the ground at the same time. We're so visually oriented. So you can watch that. And it just points you to maybe you just want to like look on Instagram and follow along just to get some ideas of what it looks like. And maybe you want to get an audiobook so that you can walk and listen and learn about movement. You can find everything on audio as
Nice.
well. So it allows you to sort of do that. And if you want, there's, DVDs and exercise DVDs, and there's audiobooks, and there's video course. I mean, it's
You got it
exhausting how
all.
much there is. Yeah, you could definitely find, if you can't find your niche, I don't know what else to say. Like, I haven't created it yet. Just wait around.
It's coming. It's coming soon. I share
It's
that
coming.
same proliferation of content
Yeah.
challenge. I'm like, oh, it's all there. Just got to dig through
Yeah.
it. I will encourage folks to go and dig up more. And I wanted to share too, we gotten some lovely thank yous from folks in our communities saying this has been amazing and wonderful. And I know folks are going to be excited to connect more with you. So I want to thank you so much for taking time and for being a fellow healthy deviant, and for just, investing the 20 some years that you've invested thinking about this differently than most people thinking about it and sharing it with the world. We need more Katy Bowman in the world with us. So, well, stay
Thank
in
you for having me.
touch. My
Yeah.
pleasure. And be wonderful and your lovely self in all of the ways that you can for the next 20 years. And I can't wait to see what happens next. We'll see you more soon. Thanks so much, Katy.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.